Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. Every now and again, I like to kind of make one of these videos where I kind of explore a little bit more of the philosophical side, if you will. I mean, law is what it is. In a lot of ways, the day-to-day of the law, when you're dealing with it in a business context or as a practical context, it can be, it does not seem to be an overly noble thing at times. It just is what it is and you deal with it. But there are policies that even go above, general policies that may come down in the spur of the moment based on the situation on the ground. There are sort of overarching themes to notions of law. And humanity from time to time forgets these things. And they do seem to revert back. If you read history, now the reversion may take, for example, in the case of the Soviet Union, may take 70 years for things to kind of go on a tangent and then kind of come back to something, that looks like a relatively reasonable thing to deal with, In this video, we're talking about negative liberty, and this is something I don't think a lot of people really understand. I really kind of hate how this was put into an almost Hegelian sort of dialectical. It was framed in sort of a positive liberty, negative liberty, because people then don't really understand what they're talking about. And I also have often wondered when I've read sort of more philosophical kind of themed content on these topics, it almost seems like, especially in an academic context, negative liberty gets short shrift. But as someone in the trenches where, the philosophy embodied in the law, that rubber hits the road, so to speak, of real life, believe me, negative liberty is pretty important. And this is not me talking in a purely Thailand context or a purely U.S. context. This is just my observation around the world. People, when they don't understand, what it is, and when it's in short supply, things get pretty unpleasant pretty quickly. Let's put it that way. And so let's get into what it is. And this is just from Wikipedia. This is just a quick and dirty sort of definition. Wikipedia.org, under negative liberty, quoting directly, negative liberty is freedom from interference by other people. Negative liberty is primarily concerned with freedom from external restraint and contrast with positive liberty, the possession of the power and resources to fulfill one's own potential. The distinction was introduced by Isaiah Berlin in his 1958 lecture, Two Concepts of Liberty. And again, I've always kind of seen this stuff in a more academic context, and I've often taken issue, just personally, with this notion that it's two things. I would argue it's sort of all one thing. We're just looking at different facets of it, but I just don't like the appellation negative liberty, that it's somehow negative. But I do understand how you can use it in that context because, in a sense, it's freedom from. It's not freedom of or freedom to. In a very fundamental way, it's the right to be left alone. It's the right to not, again, quoting directly, is freedom from interference by other people. And what is society at the end of the day than just other people, oftentimes in institutional form? That's really what you're getting down to. And the thing that concerns me, I've just been reading about the U.S. and kind of seeing things evolve here in Thailand, although I will give the Thais credit, they do have more of a live and let live attitude, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's just this overall notion that, somehow it's okay is the wrong word, that people seem to be forgetting that there's I think it's a French philosophical, I think it came from a film, there's the saying, hell is other people. And I'm not saying that in a cynical context, but the point of the quote is, freedom from other people's interference, in a sense, can be kind of pleasant. It can be kind of heavenly. And in this age we're getting into where it seems to be far too commonly accepted to poke and prod everyone for everything. for just to live their lives, to go about their business. You know, I really think we should kind of be looking at this. Like, and it's one of my favorite things about Thailand. It's why I came to Thailand. It's why I stayed in Thailand. It's why I became Thai. You know, I love Thai people's live and let live attitude. You know, and people that don't live here really don't understand how the Thais can be very conservative and simultaneously very tolerant. And when I say that, you know, people don't believe me from abroad, especially when they come in and they see the party areas and this and that. And I say, no, well, 97, 98% of Thai people are really conservative. You know, huge number of folks in Thailand don't drink, which is a staggering number when you compare, you know, and I don't have the statistics with me, but a staggering thing when you compare that to Western jurisdictions. The point I'm trying to make is, you know, Thailand had negative liberty down good, you know, and not to get into politics or anything like that, but just your day-to-day life here in Thailand some 2 years ago, going back to Jan of 2020, you know, you could pretty much do as you needed to do within reason. I mean, do what you want, go where you want without a lot of outside interference. And the same could be said for the United States, I think, although, you know, there's some arguments to be made, you know, especially in terms of travel, that some things changed toward the beginning of this millennium. And I don't want to get into all that. But as a practical matter, just walking around, living your life, not a lot of interference from other people. And again, this gets back to this notion of negative liberty, this kind of freedom from interference. And I'm not talking about, oh, I don't want to pay taxes, or I don't want to have to get a license, or I don't want to have to get a work permit. I'm just talking about, I like being able to walk into a place and eat a sandwich without anybody bothering me. You know, I mean, that is at its basic level negative liberty. And we haven't considered that enough. If I'm just voicing my opinion here, we haven't considered that enough. And you know, the US, folks in the United States, the UK, Europe, around the world, you know, we all, including Thailand, need to kind of be thinking about these things, because is it really a world you want to live in where you got to be poked and prodded and bothered and hassled and just kind of generally made to feel uncomfortable to just undertake basic tasks? Because I don't think that's a world anybody wants to live in.